I always thought our neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Quiet streets, neatly trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes safely, neighbors waving politely without getting involved in each other's business. It was perfect, boringly perfect. And then HOA Karen moved in. At first, I didn't think much of her. She smiled a lot, introduced herself like she was auditioning for a reality show, and handed me a stack of HOA newsletters thicker than my niece's summer reading list. I should have seen the warning signs, the way she corrected a neighbor for having too many gnomes in their garden, or how she measured the grass with a ruler during her daily inspection walks. But I didn't. That summer, my teenage niece, Lily, was visiting for a few weeks. Lily was bright, energetic, and completely unconcerned with HOA rules. She wore whatever she wanted, laughed at the smallest things, and had this fearless way of just being herself. I loved that about her. But I also knew that Karen's obsession with rules could turn a calm summer day into something, well, chaotic. I first noticed the tension when Lily zoomed past Karen's porch on her skateboard. Karen was sitting there with binoculars like some kind of suburban hawk. I thought she was just enjoying the view until I saw her squinting, leaning forward, and muttering something under her breath. I didn't catch the words, but her finger was already tapping a dramatic rhythm on the armrest of her chair. I sighed. That finger tapping was never a good sign. "Unbelievable," Karen said, finally rising from her chair. She glided, or maybe stormed, toward the street, the wind catching her oversized sun hat in a way that made her look even more theatrical. She waved at Lily like a general commanding troops, and I had to swallow a laugh to avoid giving her the satisfaction of seeing me amused. "Lily," she called, voice sharp and authoritative, "do you know the rules about skateboarding in the neighborhood?" Lily slowed down, tilted her head, and smiled innocently. No," she said. And just like that, Karen's expression twisted into something between outrage and righteous indignation. I stepped forward, trying to mediate. "Karen, it's just a skateboard," I said. "She's not hurting anyone." "Not hurting anyone," Karen repeated, her eyes narrowing. "The rules exist for a reason. Decency, order, community standards. I cannot." She paused dramatically, as if the words themselves were a storm she was conjuring. I raised my hands, silently begging her to breathe. I could feel my neighbors peeking from behind curtains, sensing a confrontation brewing. I whispered to Lily, "Just go inside, ignore the hurricane." But Karen wasn't done. She started packing in front of the house, muttering about bylaws, regulations, and fines. She clutched a clipboard as though it were a shield of justice, her every movement amplified by her determination to enforce the rules. Lily stood there, completely calm, almost amused by the spectacle, while I tried not to panic at how quickly this was escalating. Then out of nowhere, Karen fixed her gaze on me. "You know, someone has to enforce this," she said. Her tone was equal parts warning and thrill, like she was auditioning for the lead role in a drama. I swallowed hard. That's when I realized she wasn't joking. She was deadly serious. "I'll call the authorities if I must," she added, glancing around as if to suggest that the entire neighborhood agreed with her. I blinked. Authorities? Over a skateboard? Over a violation that had hurt no one? My stomach sank, and I could feel Lily sensing the shift too. Something tells me this summer just got a lot more interesting and a lot more dangerous. Little did I know that the real storm was yet to come, and it wasn't about skateboards. The next day, Lily decided to lounge in the backyard, soaking up the summer sun. She was wearing her favorite pair of shorts, just normal, everyday shorts, nothing scandalous, or so I thought. From the corner of my eye, I saw Karen appear at her porch, peering over the railing like a hawk. My stomach sank immediately. Karen's expression was a mixture of horror, disbelief, and righteous fury. I could practically hear her internal monologue. How dare she defy the community standards like this? I waved casually, hopping to diffuse the situation. "Hey Karen, beautiful day, huh?" Karen didn't wave back. She didn't even blink. She took a deep breath, and I knew this was going to escalate faster than a wildfire in July. "Excuse me," Karen said, marching down the steps, her sun hat tilted like a warning flag. "Young lady, come here now." Lily glanced at me, a small smirk on her face. "Is this about my shorts?" she asked, her tone teasing. Karen's face contorted. "Yes, these shorts are inappropriate, absolutely inappropriate. In this neighborhood, we maintain standards of decency." I pinched the bridge of my nose. Standards of decency over shorts. I felt my brain teetering on the edge of disbelief. "Karen," I said slowly, "they're literally shorts, that's all." Karen ignored me completely. She whipped out her phone and began dialing with the kind of intensity that made me wonder if she had been trained for battle. I realized what she was doing before she even said it. She was calling the police. I froze. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," Karen said, her voice rising. If this child refuses to comply with neighborhood rules, I will involve the authorities. Lily's smirk grew. Seriously, you're calling the cops over my shorts? Karen waved a finger like a conductor signaling the start of an orchestra. Yes, this is serious. There are rules to follow. I am simply enforcing them. I couldn't help but mutter under my breath, enforcing them like a tyrant in a sitcom. Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed through our neighborhood. I blinked, barely able to process what was happening. Cops here over shorts. Karen practically did a victory dance on the porch as the police car pulled up. She strutted down the driveway, clipboard in hand, ready to deliver her evidence of outrageous behavior. I glanced at Lily. She looked equal parts annoyed and entertained, as if she were watching a live comedy show that she hadn't bought tickets for. The officers stepped out, looking around cautiously. I could see the confusion in their eyes, two adults in a suburban backyard, one hysterical over a pair of shorts, the other, a teenager just standing there, calm as can be. Karen immediately launched into her explanation, speaking faster than a news reporter during breaking news. This is a violation of community standards, absolutely unacceptable. I demand action. One officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unsure how to respond. Ma'am, what exactly is the violation? Karen huffed, the child is wearing shorts that do not meet the standards of modesty as outlined by the HOA bylaws. This is serious, I insist. I stepped forward quickly, trying to reason. Officers, it's just clothing, no one is being harmed, there's no law being broken. Karen whipped around to glare at me. You are encouraging this rebellion, you two are complicit. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some filming discreetly, others whispering to each other in disbelief. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lily, sensing the absurdity, crossed her arms and said sarcastically, Wow, next time I wear shorts, should I submit a written request? Karen's face turned red. This is serious, someone must answer for this. I realized then that the day was no longer about shorts. It had become a test of patience, logic, and sanity. The cops were politely confused. Karen was wielding her moral authority like a sword, and my niece was about to become the center of a suburban showdown that no one would forget. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what came next. Little did I know, this confrontation was about to escalate to a level that would involve live streams, judges, and a public spectacle that would leave the entire neighborhood talking for weeks. The police officers approached cautiously, exchanging glances that said, Are we really here for this? I wanted to laugh, but the tension made it impossible. Karen, on the other hand, radiated self-importance, like she had been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. She waved her HOA binder dramatically, pointing at Lily as if she were presenting evidence in a high-stakes trial. Do you see this? This is a clear violation. Community standards are not optional. She must be held accountable. One officer cleared his throat, probably trying to keep a straight face. Ma'am, we need to understand what law has been broken. Karen gasped, Law, this is about decency, about morals, about protecting the neighborhood from. She gestured wildly at Lily's shorts as though they were a dangerous weapon. I stepped forward. Karen, seriously, she's wearing shorts, that's it, no one's being harmed, there is no law against this. Karen spun toward me, eyes blazing. You're enabling this behavior, you're part of the problem. If someone doesn't take action, chaos will reign. Lily, standing perfectly calm, looked at me and then back at Karen. Chaos because I wore shorts? She asked, raising an eyebrow. The officers shifted uncomfortably. One whispered to the other, probably saying something like, I didn't sign up for suburban morality policing. Another tried to mediate. Ma'am, perhaps this can be resolved without taking any drastic measures. Karen's face twisted into a mixture of shock and fury. Drastic measures? No, I'm simply enforcing what is right. She took a step toward Lily as if preparing to haul her into a full-blown arrest. I felt my stomach drop. She actually might try it. I couldn't let that happen. I placed a hand gently on Lily's shoulder. Listen, we're not going anywhere with this. Karen, you need to calm down. Karen ignored me completely. She started narrating Lily's crime to the officers, waving her arms and pointing at specific sections in her binder. Do you see this? Section 4.2, subsection C, shorts must cover at least this much. She held her fingers in a tiny rectangle for emphasis, as if measuring the exact indecency. Neighbors had started to gather on the sidewalks, some filming secretly on their phones, some just watching in stunned silence. It felt like the neighborhood had gathered for a theatrical performance, only the actors were oblivious to how absurd it looked. Lily, still remarkably calm, smirked at me. I feel like I'm on a reality show right now. I nodded, whispering back, believe me, you are, and we didn't even audition. Karen, sensing that her authority was being questioned, started packing in small circles. You cannot just ignore this. Standards must be upheld, morality must be defended. I could see the officers exchanging increasingly awkward glances. One officer muttered under his breath, "She's really serious, isn't she?" The other nodded slowly, clearly trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Karen suddenly grabbed Lily's arm as if preparing to escort her to the police car herself. "Come with me," she commanded. I stepped forward sharply. "No, Karen, you're not taking her anywhere, step back." Karen's eyes widened in shock, like I had just interrupted a sacred ritual. You dare." I cut her off. "Yes, I dare, you're overstepping, there is no law here, you are not the police, you are not the judge, and you are not in charge of enforcing morality with handcuffs." Lily gave me a grateful grin, and I felt a surge of relief that she wasn't scared. She stood her ground beside me, shoulders back, looking far braver than I felt. Karen's face turned red and she spun around to the officers, trying to regain control. "Officers, see what I mean? She refuses to comply, she is." The officers politely shook their heads, signaling that they were not going to enforce Karen's personal rules. It was a tense moment. Karen's outrage collided with reality, and for a split second the entire neighborhood held its breath. I knew right then that this was just the beginning. Karen was about to realize that her obsession with rules and shorts wasn't going to be respected by law or common sense. And when that realization hit, well, the spectacle was only going to get bigger. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more ridiculous, something happened that made my jaw drop. A neighbor's phone beeped and I caught a glimpse of the screen. The local courthouse was live streaming a minor hearing for transparency, and somehow, by pure coincidence, the judge was watching our backyard drama unfold in real time. I froze, the judge, watching Karen losing her mind over shorts. I could barely breathe without laughing, except the situation was still tense enough to feel dangerous. Karen had not noticed yet. She was still focused on Lily, pointing at her shorts, shaking her finger like she was some kind of moral general ready to enforce the law of the land herself. "This is unacceptable," she yelled. "Absolutely unacceptable, standards must be maintained." Lily, for her part, raised an eyebrow and muttered under her breath just loud enough for me to hear, "I feel like I'm about to be famous for nothing." I stifled a chuckle. "You might be," I whispered back. The police officers looked increasingly uncomfortable. They had clearly not expected to be drawn into a live courtroom drama from a quiet suburban backyard. One of them glanced at me, giving the tiniest shrug, silently saying, "Good luck with this." Karen, meanwhile, had escalated to full theatrical mode. She flailed her clipboard like it was a sword, dramatically pointing to Lily as if the girl herself were evidence of society's collapse. "Do you not see? This is a threat to the moral fabric of our community. Someone must take responsibility." I tried to step in, but the tension was so thick I could barely speak. "Karen, no one is threatening anything, it's just shorts. Please calm down." She spun toward me and her eyes widened as she caught sight of a neighbor's phone filming her outburst. And then she noticed the live stream notifications popping up on everyone's devices. That's when the panic set in. I swear, for a second, she looked like a cartoon character who had just realized she was on live television. Her voice hit a new pitch. You're all conspiring against me, this is a travesty, they're laughing at me, they're filming me." I took a step closer to Lily, ready to protect her from the situation spinning out of control. "It's okay, Lily, just stay calm, this is Karen's problem, not yours." Lily, ever unbothered, tilted her head and looked at me with a smirk. Honestly, it's kind of funny. I wanted to laugh, but I also wanted to scream. The absurdity of it all, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, the police politely standing by, Karen flailing like she was performing in a one-woman play, and a judge watching the entire thing unfold live was almost too much. Then Karen made her move. She grabbed Lily's arm, determined to escort her to the police car herself. "Come with me," she barked like a drill sergeant in a suburban war. I felt my stomach drop. No, not happening. I stepped forward, placing myself firmly between them. "Karen, you're not taking her anywhere. Step back right now." Karen's face went through 1,000 emotions in a split second: shock, indignation, disbelief, and finally panic. You, how dare you?" I cut her off. "I dare because you're insane if you think you can enforce personal rules with handcuffs. The police are not enforcing this, and neither am I going to let you humiliate my niece." The officers quietly nodded behind me. I could feel their silent approval. They were clearly relieved someone had taken charge of this ridiculous standoff. Karen froze for a moment, scanning the yard. Her eyes landed on the livestream notifications again, and I could see the realization hitting her like a thunderbolt. The judge could see everything, every dramatic gesture, every word, every flailing arm. Her ego, which had been her weapon all morning, suddenly felt completely exposed. Neighbors gasped quietly, some whispered into their phones, and the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Karen's shoulders slumped slightly, a crack forming in her theatrical armor, and for the first time that afternoon, she hesitated. I whispered to Lily, "Stay behind me, watch this, it's about to get interesting." Lily grinned, gripping my arm. I've never been part of something this insane. And at that moment, I realized the real storm wasn't over shorts. The storm was Karen, and she was about to collide spectacularly with reality. By this point, the entire neighborhood seemed to be holding its breath. Karen had fixed her glare on Lily, who was standing there calmly, smirking like she'd been cast in the starring role of a comedy she didn't audition for. I felt my stomach twist with a mix of anxiety and disbelief. The police officers were standing off to the side, politely unsure whether to intervene or pretend this wasn't happening at all. Karen, of course, was not about to let common sense interfere. She took a step toward Lily, her binder held like a shield of justice. "Come with me," she barked. Her voice was sharp and commanding, echoing across the quiet suburban street. I didn't hesitate, I stepped directly in front of Lily. "No," I said firmly, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You are not taking her anywhere." Karen's jaw dropped. You dare." "Yes," I interrupted, trying to keep my tone calm but authoritative. "I dare because this is absurd, this is ridiculous. You are not the police, you are not the judge, and you are certainly not allowed to humiliate a teenager in front of an entire neighborhood." For a moment I thought she might actually stop, but Karen wasn't one for subtlety. She flailed her arms, waving her binder like a weapon. "I am enforcing the rules, morality, decency. The very soul of this community is at stake." Lily crossed her arms and tilted her head, her smirk growing wider. "The soul of the community, over shorts." I shot her a quick glance, exactly I thought, over shorts. The officers exchanged awkward looks, clearly unsure how to proceed. One of them leaned over to whisper to another, "Does she really think we're going to arrest a teenager for wearing shorts?" The other nodded slightly, trying not to laugh out loud. Karen, meanwhile, was oblivious. She was fully committed to her moral crusade. She took a dramatic step toward the police car, determined to escort Lily herself. "You will comply, this is the law of the community," she shouted, voice quivering with self-importance. I planted my feet and spoke firmly. "Karen, step back, this stops now. No one is going anywhere and this isn't the law. This is your personal vendetta against a pair of shorts." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Vendetta? How dare you?" At that moment, neighbors began peeking from their windows, some filming discreetly, some whispering to each other. I could feel the tension thickening with every passing second. Karen's theatrics had turned our quiet street into a stage for a live suburban drama. Lily gave me a grateful grin. "I don't even have to lift a finger, do I?" I shook my head. "Just stay calm, I've got this." Karen, realizing she was losing control of the situation, tried to rally the officers. "You see what I mean? She refuses to comply, she must be held accountable." The officers shook their heads politely. "Ma'am, we cannot enforce your HOA rules, this is not a legal matter." Her face turned red, her hands trembling slightly as she waved her binder like a sword. You will regret this. Someone must answer for this affront to decency." At that moment, it felt like time slowed. I could see every muscle in her body tense, every nerve on edge. Neighbors were holding their breath. Lily was calm and defiant. The officers were caught somewhere between professional restraint and disbelief. I leaned closer to Lily. "See, nothing to worry about, just shorts, just a very angry Karen." Karen, seeing that she had no support from the officers, finally froze in place. Her eyes darted to the neighbors' phones, and she realized that the entire spectacle was being recorded. Her face went pale as she took in the fact that anyone watching the live stream, or anyone in the neighborhood, could now witness her overreaction in real time. For a brief moment, I could see the panic set in. Karen's performance had reached its peak, and she was starting to realize the consequences of her theatrics. The very thing she had wanted, control, authority, recognition, was slipping through her fingers. I exhaled slowly, knowing that the standoff was nearing its turning point. The absurdity of the situation had reached a fever pitch, and Karen's obsession with enforcing her rules was about to collide spectacularly with reality. And I had a front row seat. I could feel the tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Karen was frozen in place for a moment, realizing that the police weren't going to do her bidding and that the neighbors were quietly filming her every move. She looked around frantically, like a general whose army had abandoned her mid-battle. I knew it was time to take control before things got even more ridiculous. I stepped closer to Lily and put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," I whispered. "Just stay calm." She nodded, giving me a small, confident smile. Somehow, even in this absurd situation, she seemed braver than I felt. Then I turned to Karen, planting myself firmly in front of her. "Karen, you need to step back right now," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This ends here. You're not taking her anywhere, you're not enforcing some imaginary law, and you're not humiliating my niece in front of the entire neighborhood." Karen blinked, her face a mix of outrage and disbelief. This is about standards, morality, decency, you cannot just." I held up a hand to cut her off. "No, Karen, you cannot just turn your obsession with rules into a public spectacle. This isn't about morality, it's about shorts, and your performance has gone far enough." She flailed her arms again, waving her binder like a weapon. "You are encouraging this rebellion, you're undermining community standards. Someone has to answer for this affront to decency." I exhaled slowly, trying to stay composed. The officers were standing behind me, silently relieved that someone was finally bringing reason to the scene. One of them even gave me a subtle nod. I glanced at Lily, who gave me a barely there smirk, clearly entertained by Karen's melodrama. Karen took a step forward as if she were about to physically drag Lily to the police car herself. "Come with me," she demanded, voice rising in pitch. I stepped in front of her again, planting my feet firmly. "No, step back, Karen, this stops now. You're overstepping every boundary imaginable and you're embarrassing yourself." Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in fury. "You dare?" "Yes, I dare," I said, my tone unwavering. "I dare because this is completely insane and someone needs to be the adult in the room. Lily is not in trouble, you are for your behavior." Karen froze for a moment, realizing that no one was supporting her. The officers were politely ignoring her, the neighbors were quietly filming, and Lily was standing calmly beside me, not giving an inch. She seemed to radiate confidence, and it gave me the courage to stand taller, speak louder, and hold my ground. Karen's panic became more apparent as she noticed the livestream notifications popping up on multiple phones. The judge, watching in real time, was witnessing her unraveling like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I could practically see her brain racing, trying to calculate how to regain control of a situation that had already slipped through her fingers. "Do you see this?" she shouted at no one in particular. "They're laughing at me, filming me, you will regret this." I ignored her, focusing on keeping Lily calm. "Just stay behind me, Lily, don't engage. This is Karen's problem, not ours." She grinned slightly, the hint of amusement returning to her face. "I think I'm going to survive this," she said quietly. I couldn't help but smile, even as Karen flailed. "You're going to be fine, shorts don't hurt anyone. Karen's ego might need a little therapy afterward, but you're fine." The officers exchanged glances, clearly relieved that I had taken charge. The tension in the air began to ease slightly, though Karen's outrage still filled the backyard with dramatic energy. Every move she made now felt like it was amplified by her own disbelief and the knowledge that she had lost control. I took a deep breath, letting the silence speak louder than words. Karen looked around helplessly, realizing that her obsession with rules, her dramatic flair, and her moral crusade had collided head-on with reality, and reality was winning. For the first time that afternoon, I felt like we were actually gaining the upper hand. And I knew that the showdown was not over yet, but Karen was starting to see that her reign of short-spaced terror was coming to an end. I had a front-row seat to what could only be described as the suburban showdown of the century. Karen's eyes were darting back and forth between Lily, me, and the neighbors' phones, which were now practically buzzing with notifications from the livestream. And then it happened, the moment that would seal her fate. The judge, yes, the actual judge watching the live stream, decided to intervene. I didn't know if it was a call to the police or some kind of official comment, but suddenly one of the officers' radios crackled. "Judge is instructing us to de-escalate. Stand down and do not enforce any HOA-related complaints." Karen's face went from rage to disbelief in about half a second. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She flailed her arms like a wild conductor, trying to reclaim authority that had evaporated the moment the judge spoke. You can't, this is outrageous. I am enforcing standards, the law, my rules, decency. I stepped closer to Lily and whispered, stay calm, this is it, this is when reality finally hits. She smirked, I knew it would get this dramatic. Karen wasn't done. She stomped toward the police car, waving her HOA binder like it was Excalibur itself. You cannot just ignore me, someone must answer for this affront to morality. The officers, clearly trying not to laugh, stayed their ground. One even shook their head slightly as if saying, lady, your moral crusade ends here. Neighbors were leaning out of windows, some barely holding back laughter, others recording everything for posterity. I could feel the weight of the entire street watching Karen slowly unravel. Every word she shouted, every gesture she made was being documented for the neighborhood, the internet, and apparently the judge. Karen froze for a moment when she realized she had no allies. The officers ignored her, the neighborhood was watching, and her attempts to regain control were collapsing in real time. I could see the panic in her eyes. She realized her theatrics had become her own worst enemy. You'll all regret this, she screamed, pointing at everyone vaguely. You'll pay for undermining community standards, mark my words. I stepped forward, trying not to laugh. Karen, calm down, nobody is undermining anything. You just made a public spectacle over a pair of shorts and now the judge is watching, that's all. Her mouth opened again, but no words came out. She looked from Lily to me to the police, then to the neighbors' phones. The reality of the situation hit her like a tidal wave. The performance she had planned for herself had completely backfired. Finally, after a dramatic pause, she turned and stomped back toward her house, muttering under her breath. The storm of rage that had dominated the afternoon seemed to collapse inward. Her arms flailed one last time, her binder hitting the railing, and then she was gone, disappearing into her house like a character exiting a stage, defeated. Lily and I stood there in the aftermath, catching our breath. I let out a slow laugh, partly from relief and partly from the absurdity of the scene. Well, I said, that was intense. She grinned, adjusting her shorts. Intense is one way to put it. I feel like I just survived a sitcom episode. The officers gave us a nod of approval, quietly acknowledging that we had handled the situation with logic and calm, while Karen had imploded spectacularly. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some clapping quietly, others whispering to friends on their phones. I looked at Lily and realized she hadn't just survived the day, she had become the unintentional star of an unforgettable neighborhood drama. Karen's meltdown was now part of local legend, a cautionary tale about what happens when obsession with rules and ego collide. For the first time all afternoon, I felt calm. The crisis had ended. Karen's reign of terror, fueled by shorts and moral posturing, had finally been neutralized, and we hadn't needed to escalate to anything serious. All it took was logic, calm, and a front row seat to her own undoing. I put an arm around Lily and we slowly walked back toward the house. You okay? I asked. She laughed softly. Better than okay, I think I just survived HOA Karen. I smiled, shaking my head. Survived and lived to tell the tale, and trust me, this is going to be a story for a long time. As we entered the yard, I glanced back at Karen's house, where she was probably plotting her next dramatic move. I couldn't help but think that this neighborhood would never be the same, and frankly, neither would Karen. The next morning, the neighborhood felt quieter. A little too quiet, actually. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for Karen's next dramatic entrance, but it didn't come. She hadn't stepped outside, and from what I could tell, her binder remained untouched, her ego bruised and battered from yesterday's spectacle. I sat on the porch with Lily, sipping coffee and trying not to laugh too loudly. The absurdity of the entire ordeal still lingered in my mind. Karen, the police, the live stream, the judge watching in real time. Shorts, all over shorts. So I said, glancing at Lily, you survived the Karen apocalypse, how's it feel? She grinned. Honestly, pretty epic. I feel like I've won some kind of moral victory award for the free world, or at least the neighborhood. I chuckled, you did, and you did it without even trying. The gossip in the neighborhood had already begun. Neighbors peeked from their windows, exchanged knowing glances, and whispered about Shorts Karen and her spectacular meltdown. I couldn't help but grin. The name would stick, and Karen would be forever immortalized as the woman who tried to police morality with a clipboard and lost. Even the police officers gave me nods of quiet approval when they passed by. One of them muttered under his breath, never thought I'd see a kid survive HOA enforcement with her dignity intact. I laughed. Neither did I admitted. Karen eventually emerged from her house, her face still red, but she seemed to have retreated into her shell. She avoided eye contact with anyone, carefully tiptoeing across her lawn as though she were invisible. I could hear neighbors whispering and stifling giggles, and I had to resist the urge to wave. Instead, I just nodded politely, letting the silence speak louder than words. Over the next few days, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Children played, neighbors waved, and the grass grew back into its perfectly manicured state, but Karen's antics had left a permanent mark on the community. People talked about the shorts incident for weeks, sharing stories and secretly laughing at her dramatic performance. Lily and I reveled in our victory. We went about our summer as usual, enjoying sunny afternoons and laughing about the chaos we had survived. Every time a neighbor waved or whispered a quiet, "Thank you for handling the situation," I felt a strange sense of pride. It wasn't just about shorts, it was about standing up to absurdity and making sure that common sense won. Karen, meanwhile, seemed to retreat even further into her obsession with rules, but without the same sense of authority. Her dramatic gestures became smaller, her lectures quieter. I could see her packing her porch occasionally, muttering under her breath, but the sparkle of moral superiority had dimmed. The judge's watchful eyes, even in a live stream, had left a lasting impression. One afternoon, I caught sight of Karen attempting to organize her HOA binder again. She meticulously rearranged pages, straightened lines, and muttered about standards, but the aura of unstoppable power had vanished. Lily looked at me and whispered, "Do you think she'll ever recover?" I shrugged, grinning. Maybe, but even if she does, she'll never be the same, and frankly, the neighborhood will never let her forget this. As summer drew to a close, I reflected on the chaos that had erupted over something so trivial. It was a reminder that some people take rules far too seriously, that ego can turn minor incidents into major dramas, and that courage, calm, and humor can diffuse even the most absurd situations. Lily and I sat on the porch one last evening watching the sunset. "You know," she said, "I kind of feel like a legend now, survived HOA Karen, shorts and all." I laughed. "You are a legend, and you proved that standing up to ridiculousness doesn't have to be scary. Sometimes it just takes patience, a little humor, and the right person to back you up." She smiled, leaning back. "Next time she tries something like this, I'll be ready." I nodded, good, but hopefully she learned her lesson. For now, we enjoy the peace, the laughter, and the memory of the day we survived shorts Karen. And with that, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over our quiet street. Karen's binder lay untouched inside her house, the neighborhood slowly returning to its usual rhythm, and Lily and I finally breathed easy. The shorts had won, and in a small way, so had we. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.